Welcome to the Story of the Week podcast. This is a supplemental podcast to the supplemental podcast that goes along with the weekday morning newscast we call Things You Might Not Have Heard, produced by the Conversation Project as all a part of the More Better Media umbrella. My name is Jay Clifton Payne, and what I'm going to give to you in this podcast is a deeper dive into one of the stories that you picked out using our feeds for input to tell us what we talk about on our morning shows and produce for the supplemental podcast, which is the weekly wrap-up. And it gives us the top 10 stories of the week that you give from pure engagement scores from Facebook and Twitter. Now, we post stories all day long to those feeds every 50 minutes or so. And if you're checking your feeds throughout the day on Facebook and Twitter, you can see those stories. And we just ask you to engage in the stories. Read them so you get a deeper understanding of some of the things going out there that you may have missed out there. But your engagement tells us what stories are really conversational, as we say. So just engage in the story in the platform. Like it, love it, hate it, share it. Make sure you read it to get deeper details. And the more engagement we get into a story, the better chance we have of talking about it on our daily show, which goes through the top batches of stories. And we picked some of those to make it concise for the timing. Now, for the weekend, we go straight to the source and straight to the numbers. And we don't move any editorial, just give you what stories you said were the top 10 stories. Plus, stories also kind of close, 11 through 15, and the story at the very bottom of the week. We'll give you those stories right now so you know where we're going with that. And of course, I'm going to give you deeper commentary on one of those stories. The top 10 stories for this week. This is the week that ends on July the 8th, 2023. Counting these down in chronological as opposed to backwards order. Number one story was woman's leg amputated after becoming trapped in Thai airport moving walkway. Number two, heavy rains flood Chicago roads and forced NASCAR to cut short a downtown street race. And number three, Bowen Yang stepping away from podcast for bad bouts of depersonalization. Number four, Trump valet Walt Nada pleads not guilty in classified documents case. And number five, neighbors say Rudy Ferris had been living at home during 8 years family claimed he was missing. At number six, Beyonce Renaissance World Tour Pittsburgh show canceled. Number seven is California Black Reparations Task Force concludes historic 2-year work. At number eight, 3 dead, 8 injured in shooting at Como Fest in Fort Worth. Number 9 story reads, Kim Kardashian and Tom Brady dating rumors intensify after July 4th white party actions. And the number 10 story for this week per you is Macron postpones state visit in Germany amid France riots. So how we get to the story we go at, we basically take those stories, those top 10 stories, and we shuffle the order and just kind of mark them down one by one, basically battling against each other to see which story is more conversational in my mind, which story basically I want to talk about. This week, the story we will expand on for the story of the week happens to be at number 3 with the headline, Bowen Yang stepping away from podcast for bad bouts of depersonalization. And this one struck a chord with me because I deal with this, well, not exactly depersonalization every day, but I deal with issues of mental illness. I deal with depression every single day as I suffer from it. And this is something that as I've been sort of monitoring in a grander scale, from a 10,000 foot view, if you will, looking and seeing it from coming out of the pandemic, which we're still sort of in. There's a lot of people dealing with these sort of issues, and I'll sort of broad stroke it going forward, that got worse for some during the pandemic, basically became something during the pandemic, and now that we're going back to normal, are not actually getting better. So this is more or less a cry for help, I guess for me, if you will, but for folks out there who are having issues with mental illness, especially right now, as some people are doing fairly well, but as you actually look deeper into what they're doing, they're not doing so great on the inside. We're going to get into that in just a moment, but remind you that not only do you need to follow us on our feeds so you give us these things to talk about, you can email me and the show at theconversationinbox@gmail.com. When you do that, we can chat up some of those discussions. And maybe if you thought we picked the wrong story this week or picked wrong stories every single day, you can let me know. We'll see what we can do. Can't necessarily change the past, but we can see what we can do about making sure that we're putting a bit more emphasis on some of the stories so they can get some love. Sometimes when we post something at 2:30 in the morning, a lot of people can't get around to it, so it doesn't actually get the attention it could get, but we have to post all day to make this thing work, so we'll do that. But for the point of today's story, the headline on Bowen Yang stepping away from podcast for bad bouts of depersonalization, we're going to get to that story right now. So what was mostly a kind of a throwaway story, this is an article that came out of the People magazine online site. I'm not sure if it's an actual article in the the magazine because I don't read People magazine normally. But this is one that popped up in one of the aggregators. We pulled it, and you guys gave it the third highest response rate for the week. So that's why we're talking about it here, literally. And for that, it goes into detail on Bowen Yang. And of course, the Saturday Night Live star, 30 years old star of Saturday Night Live, is taking a break from this podcast. It's called Las Culturistas. And he does it with another comedian, normally Matt Rogers. So it's your general two comedians and a bunch of other comedians showing up, kind of talking about stuff. It's the overflow of hot talk radio stuff, but now more people can get it from people that want to listen to. So the radio stuff has died. But it's a fairly popular podcast. Not one I heard of before, but it's a fairly popular podcast for people who are fans of Bowen Yang and the other comedian Matt Rogers in that genre. Now, essentially, the biggest issue with this is, like we said, his mental health. Bowen Yang says he's been dealing with issues of bad bouts of depersonalization. That is a quote from him because things are basically, as he says in a quote, effing him up so bad, he needs to go away and do better stuff for himself. Now, this is something that is a serious psychological condition. According to the Mayo Clinic, depersonalization is a psychological condition in which a person regularly feels that they are having an out-of-body experience and that their surroundings are not very real. It's actually two different things. The surroundings not being real is actually another thing called derealization. So they're similar and not the same time. But this is something that he's been dealing with for a bit. And so now he's doing the best he can to break away from the stresses of everything, and this podcast in particular, because it's stressing him out. It is a iHeartMedia podcast. It is produced by Will Ferrell's Big Money Players Network. It was actually named Podcast of the Year in 2023 by iHeart's Podcast Awards. So this isn't just him and a couple other guys in the garage doing this thing. This is actual something that needs to be done because there's money behind it, and so it has to make money for it. That would be a stressor. That would mean a lot of things. I'm producing this podcast, and as I say often, there's not much money behind it except what I put into it. And so while I'm pushing it to hopefully have money come into it, if I don't do it, it's more or less an issue of me missing my sense of normalcy as opposed to me having to hit a deadline for some other corporate boss. That's not what's going on. But because of what Yang is going through right now, just not feeling well, just feeling so out of body from everything, he's stepping away from a lot of stuff, including this thing here. This is work. This is real work. Of course, his Saturday Night Live gig got held up for a while. We'll see when it comes back because the writer's strike basically gave them 3 weeks early vacation for that show. And I'm sure he's doing some comedy going around, doing some stand-up. A lot of people are doing stand-up to make up for that. But if he had any other gigs, any writing gigs, had any other things going along that had to be basically supported by writers, that's not going on right now. So if they had writers in this podcast, they're probably not helping out in the work going on in production of it. And with the looming strike for the actors may make things a little bit worse. Now, he was just in the movie Fire Island, which I saw on Netflix. I believe it was just a Netflix release. I saw the movie pop up. I didn't actually see the movie, so I can't go into deep details on that one. But fairly popular. A lot of people talked about it, a lot of buzz. But we're dealing with the fact that Mr. Yang, Bowen Yang, is stepping away from literally depersonalization. Not just saying I'm depressed, but saying literally is living his life and just seeing it as an out-of-body experience. And it's so disturbing, depressing, if you will, that he's got to take a break and kind of fix his mental health. The terms depersonalization and the term derealization are not necessarily things, or they're not things that I was really familiar with before, but I am familiar with depression. I am familiar with sort of having, out-of-body experiences here where you just sort of see things play out like car wrecks are happening in your life. So I do understand that and do know the feelings of that in my own personal life and with, many people I know in dealing with their own issues. And the way they deal with their own issues are all personal ways based on what they're dealing with. But this is something that has become a bigger issue. Maybe not particularly the depersonalization, that name of it, but there are a lot of people dealing with a lot of mental health issues right now that don't know how to manage them. And one of the big culprits, which has been documented well too often, is the pandemic. Now, the pandemic has been something that has essentially quantified and just multiplied some of the issues. But we as people, and we as people in the US of A specifically, have been barreling towards this thing for quite some time. You've seen articles for decades on the fact that older people have a hard time keeping friends. Things coming out of the college culture, then going to a new culture as an adult, and adulting, which is now a meme, turning into an adult from a child, if you will, has been a serious issue all our lives. We just didn't notice it because no one took into the case that we should be having fun all this time. Now that there's a bigger deal and bigger talk about, living your life to the fullest and getting the best out of what you can do in your lifetime right now, and the real reality that there's no longer getting a job, working until you're 65, getting a gold watch, and then hoping to not die in 5 years. Number one, you don't get a job that lasts for that long. Number two, we're not dying that young anymore, so we have to keep working to keep living, literally. A lot of the changes in the way things work out are depressing. A lot of things, the way things worked out in the past, were actually depressing already. We just didn't know that because as we lived through our generational growth, things got better, or things technologically got better. Life didn't necessarily get better for many folks, but the way we interact, the way things work out have gotten better. And some of that technology has kind of made us worse. Cell phones are the most amazing thing ever, and smartphones are even more amazing to that point. But as soon as they became a conduit to the vast amount of knowledge on the internet itself, a very great construct that was amazing and life-changing, essentially changed our lives for the worse. There's so many things out there to make you feel bad about yourself that it's amazing that the things out there to make you feel good about yourself even exist at this point, because there's a lot more money, a lot more intrigue, a lot more eyeballs catching for things that make you feel bad than make you feel good. Our politics is not about debating what's good or what's bad for the vast amount of people, what gets more people better stuff so that the people who are on the other side can actually aspire to something else. It is now just a matter of the us's staying us's and the thems staying thems and not allowing any other thems to become us's. And even as some of us's are working their ways very quickly to becoming one of them, protecting them from whatever it is to have the labels, even if they have all the, quantities and qualities of being what you're trying not to be. Upward mobility or downward mobility does not exist. It's a matter of people in power, people in the small minority of people who are in charge of stuff want to make sure they hold on to that power and keep that minority a minority, and everybody else can fight about things. Even when on the surface, you seem to match up with other people. I'm a person that, as a political thought process, I match up on people who are more conservative. I will freely admit that I'm basically right of center, but because I am a Gen X black guy, I'm not necessarily asked into the Republican parties, even though for a while I tried to run that as more of a label, try to run more conservative stuff because I worked in conservative talk radio, and that's where the money was. But at some point, you have to, live your life and realize that some of the things that people are spouting out there, unless you've got a whole lot of money and got that background on your own, you can't honestly believe in it and stuff. You can't honestly live by that stuff. And just the realities of how people in the world live, you can't just want them to have to suffer all day long just to prove a point. I didn't mean to get to the political point, but that is part of the problem. So a lot of the things that we play off against each other are bad for us, and it is what it is. That is how life goes. But the bigger problem comes from essentially just our isolationist nature by nature, which shouldn't be that way, because humans are literally designed to be in groups. Literally designed to have that sociability. We may not run in packs initially, but we're supposed to be together. It takes a village, not so much to raise a child, but literally to live together. You find groups of people who you can surround yourself who are like-minded and have the same general goals, and you build a organization, a civilization around that. And then you have sort of circles that meet you around that basically turn larger circles or whatever. So you may be a middle-aged, middle-class white person, but you have something in common, not just with middle-aged, middle-class white people, but with middle-aged, middle-class other people in the same general vein, or, middle-class people just because they're middle class or whatever. And now my biggest complaint about the differences we have are not so much racial, but economical, but that's a whole nother podcast for another day. But in these cases, we should be joining in together and being together and trying to do the best for ourselves and for the thems, not just pushing them down because they're down there, but giving them enough stuff to be selfish so that they're not, arguing that they should be one of us. If they have enough good stuff on their own, they're not going to push for us to lose stuff because they're doing fine. That's a weird sort of conservative type of mindset that, I'm trying to work myself out, but it is what it is. The problem with here, and we're dealing with specifically targeting the story on Bowen Yang, is that a lot of people are feeling the crunch of isolationism, number one, as a exponential thing from pandemic life. We spent 2 years on lockdown, literally not going out to places, being distant from folks, not being able to have the natural interactions with folks, not to be able to meet people literally in the streets or in the elevators because we're scared they might breathe on us or we could breathe on them. And the natural course of meeting and conversating and joining things did not happen. Yes, we had Zoom calls to reach out to people we already knew, but it's kind of hard to do a random Zoom with a random person and know that you're going to engage or not. The art of actually making friends as an adult is a pretty solid art. It's more art than science because, trust me, I have tried and the science part doesn't work. The art part isn't working so well. So when you can't go out there and meet new people and engage in more folks and learn new things the natural way, it becomes an issue and you get stuck in your silo or stuck with whoever you can get to on the phone or the Zoom calls. And at some point in time, the technology turns into a burnout. And then you open things back up and you realize the silos that have been created, the walls that have been built, the sort of ways we have separated ourselves while we were locked down aren't going away. We're not breaking those walls. We're not busting those chains open. We're not letting the thems into us now. And we're definitely trying to keep the us's stuck as us's and not go anyplace else. We are a people, I'm talking more specific Americans, but people in general you're seeing in the modern, the European type nations and our sort of thought process, where it's all about us. We spent a week or two chasing down a submarine that was piloted and manned by a bunch of billionaires. And we were all engaged in trying to save the billionaires, which we should have. But at the same time, literally a large ship off a major European nation was sinking and people were dying from it. And the governments were doing what they can to keep those people off the land, on the boat, and in tragic cases, in the water so they didn't have to deal with it. Even though, yes, it meant to a lot of people dying from a very, very bad situation that was there. We don't want to join in with people, and we don't want people to do better as a case. We want ourselves to do just as well as we were doing, just maybe slightly better, but we don't want to bring other folks in there to actually do that. It's something that is bad for people, bad for America, if you will, but it's bad for people. And what you get in a lot of cases is people who are sad, depressed, having bouts of all sorts of mental illness because they can't connect with other people, or they won't connect with other people because other people won't allow that to happen. A guy like Bowen Yang is especially susceptible to this because he's in a job that needs people to give him adulations to actually keep going. People have to pay him to show up and entertain them. They have to like him. They have to enjoy what he's doing. They have to throw money at him for the things he's doing. And when he stops doing things they like, it goes away. He's not working at a plant making some sort of product where you're looking for the product and he's by a byproduct making it. Unless you call the product the entertainment value of Bowen Yang, and then it goes down there. On an ensemble cast like Saturday Night Live, everyone is making their bits of art for this. And so if his art is not as good as other people's art, he'll get less screen time and he'll get less time doing stuff for people and less time writing things and eventually find his way down the bottom of the pile and not getting things there. that could lead to some pretty big depression in its own, when you know that your work, which you think is good, is either not as good as you think it is, or worse, it's pretty good, but no one gets a chance to see it because of other factors that aren't exactly because of you. Not your talent's bad, not because you're not working hard enough, but other things are in the way. So let's back up a couple steps and kind of talk this thing out. Depression is a serious issue. These particular ailments, depersonalization, and also dealing with the thought process of derealization, are very serious. And many people who have dealt with either just actual clinical depression, being, diagnosed with it, or just been in a situation where they've had an out-of-body experience and they've just sort of seen things happening as things go on, it's really real. I saw the anniversary watching of the Hell in the Cell match, the 25-year anniversary between Mick Foley and The Undertaker. Of course, Mick Foley known as Mankind at the time. And The Undertaker said that essentially the closest thing he's had to an out-of-body experience was that time when he threw Mick Foley off the cage of the Hell in the Cell and he went through that table. Because this was really, really new into the situation when doing this, the crowd and the table and everything was so close to the ring that it literally, when it happened, everybody just kind of piled over and kind of looked to make sure that Mick Foley wasn't dead. Not only was he not dead, he went for more punishment. But that was the first time, he said, and the closest thing he got to a out-of-body experience where he saw himself staring at Mick Foley going to the ground and then crashing through the table and wondering if he was going to get up. Obviously, that turned into an iconic WWE wrestling match that people are talking about literally 25 years afterwards. But these are things that things that happen to people. You have those experiences where you're talking to someone and then whatever's happening, you can see yourself doing the thing and seeing it's going poorly as going on. You don't usually get out-of-body experiences when you're proposing and someone's about to say yes. You get one of those when you're proposing and someone's about to horribly embarrass you in front of the public that you're trying to do this thing. So these things happen. These things happen a lot more than you think about. And there's nothing you can do about it. Well, that's not true. There's a lot you can do about it, but there's nothing you can do about the conditions that are growing around you. You can understand that there are triggers, there are conditions, there are things going on that may make it worse. But you can't necessarily fight all the feelings and all the issues with depression. You can't fight it whether you are deeply involved because you are dealing with clinical depression, whether you're taking medication because it is that bad, or whether you're just feeling down and alone because you're going through a bad time. There are many ways you can deal with your depression or anxiety or your issues in these ways. And we're going to wrap this up with some of those things you can do to help yourself. And one of the things, of course, is to get other help. That is, reach out to someone and talk it out. Getting therapy is not a taboo like it used to be. Men are actively talking about therapists right now, and women who are been, in the past, shamed to not go out and talk about their issues are talking about them with people, counselors, and therapists and people like that. So the biggest thing you can do is find someone who is capable of talking to you about it to talk to you about it. Go to an actual licensed therapist. Go to a coach of some sort that actually can help people through. Go to a counselor or your pastor in church. And yes, there have been some issues with people going to those folks as well. But if there's somebody that you can trust and you can actually get something out of it and you can see that they're not manipulating you in the process, someone to talk to works out. And someone to talk to, someone on a friend level that obviously you don't spook out, because once you start talking depression, start talking issues on that end, unfortunately, that person starts to own some of those issues. So you can add your depression to their depression. So find someone who is detached enough, who can deal with this, and who is capable enough to talk you through things in a calm and centered manner, not just going all panicky. Now, of course, the biggest thing is you need to not withdraw from life. In this case, Bowen Yang is withdrawing from work because so many things are just sort of making it worse. But that doesn't mean he's withdrawing from life itself. He's not, not showing up for parties, not hanging out with people that he knows, not spending time with loved ones. That's where things get really, really crazy. Once you start to change your routine, and sometimes you can't help that, Part of depression is we are disassociated with people that we're used to or situations you're used to. If you lose a job, so you no longer go into that place of employment, that's a serious blow to your thought processes. Don't lose touch with everyone else out there around you because you lose touch with a big part of yourself. Also, just do more stuff. Be more active. One of the best ways to fight depression and fight a lot of illnesses is just exercise. Be more active and go out and do more low-level activity if you're not up for big stuff. If you're actually pretty big into fitness, challenge yourself to something big and give yourself something to focus on with that one. You've got to face these things you're dealing with. You can't avoid them, and definitely not forever, until you actually name that demon, and then you go and equip yourself to fight that demon. That demon will always be there. You may be in your face, you may be lurking behind the shadows, but that thing you need to deal with will always be there. And it may be something that's very hard. It may take a long time to work yourself up to fix, but you got to make sure eventually you fix that. And on the nutritional side, make sure you're not doing a lot of alcohol, not doing a lot of drugs, and just eating a healthy diet. Keep your body on the inside as clean as possible so that it can react as well as possible to all sort of stressors. Eating a healthy diet, not eating much of junk food, not drinking too much alcohol, and definitely not taking any drugs is going to help you with your stress levels, as your body doesn't have to fight off those things along with your mind in your depression. And the thing that really hurts a lot of people, because it's actually work, is to find a routine and stick to it. And by routine, I definitely don't mean find as many random and spontaneous things to do to break yourself out of it so you can go on with your life. Find a routine that you're going to stick with for a while, because the routine helps you manage your day so that you can go through and know what's coming next and what's coming next. The issue with this turns into people who overdo it and find too many things to do, so they have an overbooked schedule and that stresses them out more. But sometimes knowing that you have to get up at a certain time, you have to be somewhere at a certain time, you have to do certain things for a certain amount of time, and be back at a certain time to get rest for the next day is calming. Knowing what everything needs to be done in your life and not having too many different variables to change things is a very calming thing. Having everything played out for you so you don't have to think about it actually works well to your mental health. It may seem a little dull and boring, but if you're looking for relaxation, not having to overthink things is a great thing to do. So this one got a little out of hand. It was supposed to be mostly focused on Bowen Yang, and it mostly turned into focus on how to battle depression, which is, I guess, the excuse I needed to do that podcast by using this to step into it. We are definitely sending positive thoughts and prayers towards Bowen Yang getting better. We're sending positive thoughts and prayers towards you. If you're dealing with bouts of depression, like I deal with basically every single day, or specifically this depersonalization type of issue, if that is what you're dealing with, then we will offer all the support we can give to you. We want you to be here. As I'll say early this time, I always say, stay hydrated, stay limber, stay on task, because we want you to basically do the best for yourself physically, because the mental part and the work part and life part gets to be pretty jacked up. We want to make sure that you're taking part of the things and make sure you are on the best possible wavelength as ever. So I've already said that, so hopefully I won't repeat that when I get to the actual close. But just remember, we are all dealing with issues, and a lot of it stems from the last 5 years of just turmoil and things going on. Even more years if you want to try to throw in for America, our political situation. It's just all sorts of crazy. And with all sorts of crazy going on, it's really easy to get stressed out and get isolated from people who you don't want to be around with, and some people who just don't want to be around you for whatever reason, and start dealing with things that are not so great mentally. There is always another day if you allow yourself to check that day, and always another chance to fix anything that happened the day prior. So find a routine, take care of yourself physically, do your best to take care of yourself mentally and fight back some of those things that are engaging in you. And make sure you don't lose touch with reality and your routine and their people, because that's your first sign of things going wrong. It's when you can't relate to the folks you've been relating to before. It either means you're about to hit a big breakthrough and they're really bad people, or you're about to have some sort of moment, and those people need to be near you so they can help you through it. With that, we're wrapping up this week's podcast. Now, how do we get to the Bowen Yang story to talk about? This was a number 3 story for the week that you guys told us about via our feeds on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/This Is a Conversation Project and Twitter.com/th_conversation are our links, our pages, our feeds on those websites. As you're checking your feeds for your other stuff throughout the day, see what we're talking about. Every 50 minutes or so, we post a new story headline for you to engage in, and you just engage in it. If it's something that you like, hit like. If it's something that you hate, on Twitter, it's all heart, so hit like, but hit hate as well. Put whatever emotion you want to into the story headline and share it with some people so more people get into it. Make sure you share the feeds and then what we're doing for more people so we have more engagement in it. We get a full engagement score for the story of the week, and then we, every weekday morning, give you some of the top stories for the morning in the newscast, and every weekend we give you the top 10 stories per the pure data, plus I get to go on one story this week. You could say that this week was kind of a wild band of stories to go to, which is how this story got to be sort of voted into as the top one to talk about. But it also gave me a chance to do something I like to talk about more because I want to do more for myself and for people who feel they can't get out of it, is talk about depression, talk about mental illness, talk about people who just feel super sad, whether it's clinical or just a bad batch or something, and what they can do about it. And I'm glad I had a chance to do that. You can email the shows, all the stuff at The Conversation Project at theconversationinbox@gmail.com. Of course, our website for all of our products and services and things we give is thisisaconversationproject.com. When you stop by there, if you think we're doing pretty good what we're doing, consider checking out the sponsors pages and visiting the sponsors. Those are all affiliate links. We don't get paid unless you use them, so that's how that works. Or our partnerships page where you can directly help us keep things going from here. I've already did the stay hydrated, stay limber thing, so I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to remind you that this is a combination of what you do to help us make this out. So we don't know what story we'll be talking about in the Story of the Week class until we know what we have for the weekly wrap up. We won't know any of those things without your help in the feed. So make sure you're stopping by our feeds, checking us out, and just checking in on us because we appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for being a grand listener to the Conversation Projects, all of the stuff we do here. We will talk to you, in the case of this one, on one big story of the week that you will choose, and we won't know that until go through the week. So we'll talk to you again in 7 days, and thank you so much for being a part of the family.